considerable cloud cover over the Caribbean Sea as we approach the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade this morning. And if you're able to maintain an internal calm when all around you is going mad, then you'll be able to appreciate and absorb the beauty that is here in downtown Kingston or wherever in the country you are. Good to have you. We're here today for Women's Center of Jamaica. They're having a conference here. You'll hear all about what's to be on the agenda very soon. But we know that you have choices. We're happy when you come here, happy when you find reasons to stay. This is the hotline.
Emily's views, her position on the issues, her point of view backed up by the facts. Here are Emily's views.
It's an amazing thing when we sort of get accustomed to good news. Good news in a sphere that we're not historically accustomed to having. We so take it for granted that it really doesn't even come on the front pages of the national newspapers or even on the front pages of the business papers. In both of the dailies, it is nothing short of amazing. We had the Article 4 consultation from the International Monetary Fund after a team visited Jamaica the end of April up to Wednesday, the 7th of April, and they issued their Article 4 consultation, their statement, with such commendation for the country, which cannot be too much in light of all that is going on. But it is not just a blanket commendation, it is a sort of a warning as to some of the things that are coming and the constant monitoring that is necessary. How this is not on the front page of the dailies is beyond me. But anyway, since this is front page, over the last decade, Jamaica has successfully reduced its public debt. And even the reduction 10 years on, even if it is not accompanied by anything else, and it's hard for it not to be accompanied by anything else, it is something so fundamental for us to celebrate that the absence of celebration is shocking. Because we've lived through a period where we haven't been able to maintain roads. We still are not there. But we're maintaining a 1 or 2% now, or those that are not being maintained, there's a $40 billion sum coming from all that we have done over the last 10 years or so to be able to have enough to farm out $40 billion to build roads that have been broken down. And I do not think that what has happened is properly appreciated or that it is being recited with the degree of precision that is necessary for us to understand so we do not return to it. So the IMF continues, and I suppose somebody will say it is Nigel Clark who has written this because he's now deputy at IMF. The problem they're going to have with it is that long before Nigel Clark was there, we were getting the very positive reports from the IMF, and not only IMF, the World Bank, Fitch, Standard and Poor's, Moody's have been giving us very positive reports, and indeed we have been seeing the crucial inroads that are being made. So we reduced the public debt, firmly anchored inflation and inflation expectations, and strengthened our external position. It has built an enviable track record of investing in institutions and prioritizing macroeconomic stability. And this is very crucial because at a time when we were digging in with macroeconomic stability, there were voices that were asking for particular spend. And Nigel Clark, for all he did, said, hold strain. Let us keep these things in range. Let us keep them in target, and we'll begin to reap the dividends. We are now just beginning to reap a 1 and 2 cent of the dividends. And if we continue to hold, when we start reap 5 and 10 cent out of the dividends, it's big things. But they continue. Jamaica has met recent global shocks and natural disasters in a manner that is agile, prudent, and supportive of growth. GDP declined in 2024-2025, and remember the whole discussion, some people gloating as to whether we were in a recession or not. Yeah? Important academic arguments seem to be creeping or desiring to take center stage. GDP declined due to Hurricane Beryl and Tropical Storm Raphael, which damaged agriculture and infrastructure and undermined tourism. Nonetheless, says the IMF, economic activity is projected to normalize as these effects wane. I make a comment on this because part of the issue that Jamaica will continue to have is that based on our location, we will be susceptible yearly to possible shocks from hurricanes. And it is the case that we have built in no catastrophe risk bonds and so forth. But even the mere fact that we have to draw down on something and we have to rebuild, that means that there has to be a breakdown of something for rebuilding to take place. So we really can't stop the disasters when they come anymore. But the question is, how available are funds to us based on seeds we've planted for the recovery? And the recovery comes in what period of time in comparison to previous years when we are sitting down as mendicants, waiting on people to dole out crumbs from their table for us. We're not there anymore. But IMF says economic activity is projected to normalize as the effects of those hurricanes, those effects wane. Unemployment has fallen to all-time low levels of 3.7% in January. The fact that unemployment has fallen, my comment now, it doesn't mean that we don't continue to have people who are being paid extremely low wages. I had a caller yesterday, a lady who wished to be called Miss Clarendon. And her discussion with me centered around what is now the highest minimum wage that we've had because of big jumps in the minimum wage over the last number of years. But even so, where the cost of living is now, and especially if you don't have an able partner, or even if you have an able partner who is earning equally minimum wage, it becomes an extremely difficult survival task. So what is the solution to that? We all have to upskill. And in upskilling, we improve productivity. When we improve productivity and all of the underlying structural issues are changed because of what is going on, then it must of necessity lead to greater earning capacity, and not only greater earning capacity, but actual higher earning. I heard the opposition leader lamenting yesterday. It was such an uncanny moment, because in the face of the IMF story and all the glowing reports, his lament was the low growth that we've had and the low wage per capita. Something that the former Minister of Finance, Dr. Nigel Clark, spoke about at length in his budget presentations, and which I brought to the people of this country through this program. And it is important to understand why is it that our per capita wage is now about US $7,000 in comparison to the Caribbean counterparts, which happen to be about 20,000 US. It has been that way because whereas they continued on the productivity trajectory, moving up and up, and they had good macroeconomic management over decades, they didn't amass the debt burden that we amass, such that we had to go back to the IMF because we were near 150% of debt to GDP. And because of that, we were in a perpetual wage freeze. So the thousands of public sector workers could not have had any wage increase above 3% for decades. And that is why you had to include preferential treatment or some sweeteners in the pot, such as lower rates of interest from the NHT for public sector workers, because we were not able to pay them because we so badly managed the economy. We are completely out of that range right now. And the reason we are now at US $7,000 wage per capita, that is per person on average, it doesn't mean that each person earns that. But it means when you average the total value of goods and services and divide by the number of people, then you come out on average with 7,000. The reason we are at 7,000 now is because of the wage restructuring exercise that Nigel Clark just did, which brought up wages to way above what public sector workers were getting cumulatively over a 15-year period. So it is a start. It has to continue. And I think we have to appreciate it, not only to continue to hold the government now to the macroeconomic framework that is reaping dividends, but any other government that is to come. We need to understand so that in the dead of night, we can talk this thing. And when they come and talk rubbish to us, we need to know what to dismiss, especially now in this rubbish era where any and everybody gets up and put up a phone and just start talk. And nobody is vetting for accuracy. Nobody is vetting for any cerebral disaggregation of issues. We cite the problem without understanding why is there a problem, why the problem existed for so long, and what is going to lead to the fix. But the IMF continues. So we had the decline, we have the low levels of unemployment. Inflation has converged to the BOJ's target band of 4 to 6%. Current account has been in modest surplus for the last 2 fiscal years, with strong tourism revenues and high remittances. Remember also the remittances, because of all that is going on in the world, it is plummeting. Well, not plummeting, but it is dropping. Right? But the international reserves position says the IMF has continued to improve. The outlook points to growth settling at its potential rate once fiscal year 25-26, which started the 1st of April. The recovery is complete, and with inflation stabilizing at the BOJ's target range. One of the beauties of building independent institutions is you have something like the Bank of Jamaica, which has sufficient degree of independence and which has the mandate of inflation targeting and managing inflation. You see what is going on in the United States. I think you heard a discussion I had on this station with Paula Ann some weeks ago about the possible independence of the Federal Reserve in the United States being under threat with what is going on and how it sends the market into a frenzy. We don't have anything like that here because institutional independence is a thing of great import. But the IMF warns that the global developments require continued close monitoring. I mentioned this some weeks ago, the global downside risks emanating from tighter global financial conditions, lower growth in key source markets for tourism, and trade policy disruptions remain high. Extreme weather events such as floods, hurricanes, or earthquakes could negatively affect economic activity, which is one of the reasons why even the removal of the wage to GDP ratio by this finance minister, it needs to be watched and to be monitored, because what I understand they intend to do with not including the wage to GDP ratio, because they say it has been missed more than it has been achieved. But what they intend to do is to now talk productivity in every sector. When you increase productivity by having, clear codes as to how people are to work and what their targets are, and when people are meeting those targets, and when the economy is in a position to pay what people are actually worth, then the money will be there to actually pay them. So you don't really need to set a tight wage to GDP ratio as we had before. But what the IMF is saying, and with which I agree, because there are so many things external to us, and therefore we have no control over them because of where we are located and the potential weather shocks and the setbacks that can come, we have to always build in whatever macroeconomic programs we're having, our inherent vulnerabilities. So whereas we want people to produce and to give them whatever, make sure we farm out a lot for recovery. So the Jamaican authorities continue to implement sound macroeconomic policies aimed by robust policy frameworks. And it goes on to commend the BOJ, their approach to monetary policy, anchored in their inflation targeting around the midpoint, and those expectations have declined close to the upper band of the BOJ's target. The bottom line is this analysis coming at this time where the world is with all of the erratic issues coming from the United States, a war in Ukraine continuing, and so many unpredictables on external front. We are doing the best we can in controlling the things we can. The infrastructural investment in crime, those are now reaping results, and the IMF Article 4, it speaks about that as well. If we stay the course on macroeconomic platform and be sensible, then we can only reap more dividends. This is not something that we do not talk about. This is big, big news, and it needs to be put out for people to understand it, and proper assessment of it needs to be done. Those are my thoughts.